boss of the NEU, the National Education Union. Mary, good morning. Sorry, I should say Joint General Secretary is the title. Morning, Dr. Bousted.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. Why, just so we understand, why have you changed the terms of the strike this time with exemptions for some groups?
Well, there's always been exemptions for some groups,
Sure.
For vulnerable children, but we're approaching the exam period, so we've also created exemptions for year groups, year 11 and year 13 and year 6 who are taking exams.
And when was the last time, just give us a sense of, take us inside the negotiations, if you would, when was the last time you spoke to the government? How are relations?
Well, relations are non-existent because the government is in radio silence mode. We last spoke to Gillian Keegan the Thursday, the week before Easter, which was the last day of the negotiations, 6 days of negotiations we had, which came out with the offer, which all the unions have rejected.
What would it take? Gillian Keegan and the education secretary and the government, I'm sure, would say that they're keen to talk and they're keen to have further discussions. What would it take for those discussions to start up again?
Well, we've been very clear, just pick up the phone. They're not keen to talk. They've said, well, they're acting in a fit of pique. You rejected a completely inadequate offer. All unions rejected it. And now we're just leading it to a peer review body, which, by the way, is not independent. The government chooses who goes onto the peer review body and has the power either to accept or reject the recommendations of the peer review body. It's not negotiation and they're not independent.
And in order to get those conversations going, to try and minimise this disruption, can you give us a sense of areas where you might be prepared to compromise in order to reduce this disruption for kids? Obviously, we understand you're a union, we obviously understand you're fighting for your members, and people have tremendous respect for teachers. But just give us a sense, and we ask this often of people who are conducting strike action, just give us a sense now in public, with lots of people listening, of the areas in which you're prepared to compromise in order to try and stop this disruption.
Well, we've asked for an above inflation pay rise, but we'd be prepared to negotiate a decent pay rise for teachers. We would accept that there needs to be a longer term correction in teachers' pay. If you can't make it all up this year, then let's look at a multi-year deal. Let's look at teacher workload. Let's look at the role of inspection. Let's look at the terms and conditions why teachers are working. It's all up for negotiation. All we have to do is get in the room and negotiate. That's what the government's not doing.
And what would you say, Dr. Bousted, to all the parents around the country who treasure, even revere teachers, have huge respect and admiration for what teachers do and depend on them, but who are themselves, as parents, dealing with a cost of living crisis and are now potentially losing a day's work because they have to look after their kids and are seeing their kids' education seriously damaged? What's your message to them?
Well, I apologise to the parents and say that this is not what the union, National Education Union, wants to do. It's not what its members want to do. But I think parents have to consider that every day now there is an ongoing crisis in our schools. We've got class sizes in secondary, the highest they've ever been since records began. Primary class sizes the highest for 40 years. We've got 500,000 children being taught by teachers who are not qualified in the subject that they're teaching. And teacher vacancies are 37% higher now than they were last year, 93% higher now than in the year before the pandemic. It's not any longer a question actually of fairness for teachers. It's a question of supply and demand, and we have lost teacher supply. So parents know very well that their child will have been taught by numerous teachers, cover teachers who do a very good job but don't know the children as well and may well not be qualified for the phase or the subject that they're teaching. They know that there's an ongoing crisis in our schools. The parents know when they look at the state of school buildings that the biggest risk on the Department for Education risk register is the loss of life or limb because of deteriorating and dilapidated school buildings. This is not an education service which is able to function properly anymore because of the ongoing crisis in our schools. And my members would not be taking strike action when they're already inadequately paid if they felt there was any alternative. We want to negotiate. We want to end this dispute. But I would ask you, has the government offered to come on your programme, and have they offered to say why they are not negotiating
Well,
with
we'd be
us?
very keen, I'm sure, to talk about. We're talking to them about all sorts of things, and I'm sure we can ask them about that. And to be clear, you're making the message very clearly heard that if they called you up today and asked you in for a meeting, you would indeed meet them face to face. Mary Bousted from the NEU, got to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed.